welcome to WRPB and WRPB Studios. As you most know, we are housed in St. Lucie County, and I think one of the most important jobs in this county is supervisor election. And I think it's one of the most important jobs in any county. And I think it's important to listen before you vote to what someone has to say, because it shouldn't be about a party affiliation. It should be about the best person for the job. I met the gentleman sitting next to me a couple of months ago, and we were just talking, and I said, why don't you come on and let's find out what he thinks, because I personally believe that we need a change in St. Lucie County. So with me is George Umansky, and you're running for supervisor election. Get it right?
You got it right, Wayne.
Okay. Okay, so my first question is, I think anybody that runs for a political office is a little crazy, okay? It takes a lot out of you. So why?
So that's a great question, Wayne. And first of all, let me just thank you for inviting me in. My purpose in running for this office is not because I need a job. In fact, I'm gainfully employed. And I could probably retire in a couple years if I wanted to. But what I saw happening here in St. Lucie County after I moved up here in 2018, but my parents were living here in 2012, are just things happening in our elections that shouldn't be happening. And unfortunately, the supervisor of elections here in this county has been in office for over 40 years.
Wow. 40
years. It's a really, really long time. And I thought, this is something that I'm interested in doing. I'm a patriot. I retired from the Air Force.
Well, thank you for your service.
My pleasure. I joined right when I was 17 years old, retired, and then got into a tech industry, which I've been doing for 26 years now. And I think my skill set fits all the requirements of this position, and I'd really like to see the office of the supervisor of elections become more transparent to the public. Doesn't matter what party you belong to or don't belong to. You should feel like when you cast your vote, whomever it's for, that your vote is going to be counted and tallied the way you cast it, and that your vote's not being canceled by someone who isn't eligible to vote. So we don't want to necessarily stop people from voting, but we want to make sure we stop ineligible people from voting and make sure that transparency, that's really the most important thing, because voter integrity and voter confidence is what it's really all about.
You know, I think that a lot of things that people might not think about is, think about a mountain, and supervisor election is on the top of that mountain, because everything, if that's not done right, all the pieces underneath are not done right. And all those other people that are voted in or not voted in are not getting the fair shake of the deal. Now, times have changed. And if you're doing something, and even in my industry, I'm in the tech industry for 30 years, almost 30 years. I can't do it anymore, like the new meat that's in here that does it. Mm-hmm. I can't. Sometimes you need fresh ideas. You can't constantly stay doing the same thing, okay, because the results are not going to be good in this world that we live in today. So I really get the changes. So, I mean, you kind of mentioned, when we talk about qualifications, you kind of mentioned you're in the military. Mm-hmm. And you're also gainfully employed, so this is not something that you're doing because, hey, I'm going to be in government and make $1 bazillion.
Not at all, not at all. In fact, I'll actually be taking a pay cut if I win this election.
Okay.
But what it comes down to qualification-wise is, in the military, I was a senior non-commissioned officer. It's where I got most of my management training, whether it be through what they called the NCO Academy, Senior NCO Academy, all courses that I went through, and I I had up to well over 65 to 85 direct reports that worked underneath of me during my tenure. Then when I retired from the Air Force, I got into the closed circuit TV access control industry, or security and surveillance, as it were, which back in 1996 that it was still very analog, but was just getting ready to make that jump into the world of IP. So I was really in there at the forefront of moving video and access control products from the old analog style to IP, which means I had to become network savvy very, very quickly. And most of the positions that I've held in this industry, which has been varied, but for the majority of the time, is in a training role, which is also what I did a lot in the military. So as a director of learning and development right now for one of the oldest CCTV access control companies in the industry,
Right.
I have to be on the cutting edge of what's going on, whether it be new networking technologies, new cybersecurity methods, new encryption methods, all sorts of new electronics, what we call SOC, systems on a chip, for new camera technologies. So in that sense, I'm very, very technically versed. Now, how does that all apply to the supervisor of elections? Well, number one, training. You've got a huge staff, permanent staff, but you also have your election staff, your part-timers that come in and work the elections, whether it be the early voting days or the actual day of voting. That's a lot of people that have to be trained, whether
Right.
it's a clerk, whether it's an inspector, whether it's the deputy. And then all of the back of the house workers. You're going to bring in some part-time people at that time as well to do all the movement of the machines, the ballots, and everything that has to be done. So overseeing a training program like that is a huge endeavor. And what I did last election is I volunteered to be a poll worker,
Okay.
just so I could see the process, and because I thought it would be an interesting experience. So I went to the training, and I was brought in as a clerk, or clerk's assistant one. So that's like the second level highest position in a precinct. So if the clerk, for whatever reason, was unavailable, I would have taken over for the clerk.
You're like a little vice president.
Sort of. But I had to also know all the other jobs. So I got to see the training, and the training was very good. Did I see some room for improvement in the training? Absolutely. Did I see some things happen in the polling place that were not, well, we'll just say not perfect? Absolutely. And probably one of the biggest issues had to do with policies versus the laws. And, this year there was a brand new election integrity bill passed by the state of Florida. So there's some new laws in place, and we need to make sure that we're following those laws the way that they were intended and not creating policies that allow you to skirt around the law.
My question is, as a voter, and not knowing the inside, okay, I want to go. I remember a day where you got an hour off from work, added to your lunch, to go vote. This early voting, mail in, call in, text your vote in, it's getting ridiculous, okay? It makes me uncomfortable, and I know how it's not secure at all.
Well, it's not the Wild West of voting that you've seen in other states, where they just randomly send ballots out to everybody that's on the register poll, or the voter registers. Here in Florida, in order to get an absentee ballot or a vote by mail ballot, you actually have to request it. And it's one of the laws that just recently changed, because you could request it more or less in perpetuity. But now, every election cycle, you have to re-request a mail-in ballot. And that mail-in ballot has to either be mailed in or dropped at a supervisor of elections office or at a drop box. The drop boxes become available during the early voting season and voting day. There is the problem, though. Those drop boxes they're manned by a deputy. Now, that's not a sworn officer. This would be an elections deputy. But policy in the last election that I was part of was that deputy, if you walked up with 500 ballots in your hand to put in that box, would sit there and not say a word to you, even though the law states that you could only bring 2.
Huh. Interesting.
But that was the policy. That's the issue of having policies. It sounds real good. The policy is non-confrontal, right? We want to encourage voting, and that's absolutely true. But do we want to encourage ballot harvesting? Absolutely not.
That's really interesting, because most of us, I'm speaking for people, really have no clue. I had no clue that is going on. I had no clue that, for me, personally, I think you should be able to walk to the box and put in 1. 2, I get, husband and wife maybe.
Husband and wife,
Okay.
family member,
But
maybe someone that's disabled.
more than that is ridiculous, because unless someone's going to review every one of those and check that they're citizens and that they're part of, they live in the area and in the precinct or wherever they vote for, it seems almost impossible to stay on top of.
Well, again, understand each one of those ballots that would be going into the box would have been requested and received by somebody. However, there are methods that can be used to, request them for people who may not even have the mental capacity to vote anymore. Say an entire nursing home. And, without getting into, all of the rumors of, a stolen election and all this stuff, that's not what I'm getting. That's not what I'm getting at here at all. What I'm trying to say is, when you have a nursing home that has a 100% voter rate, every single person in that nursing home in certain states or in certain counties, they all voted 100%, you know that there's something going on there. That
100%.
just doesn't meet
One way.
I don't care which way. Realistically, if you think about it, if you've got a large nursing home, what are the odds that every single person in there is actually going to fill out their ballot, seal it, sign it, and ask someone to drop it off for them?
Okay, so, I took care of my mom. I took her out of assisted living, and she didn't have the capacity to vote. So in the facilities, there are probably a bunch of people who don't have capacity to vote, and yet somehow they got voted.
That's the point I'm getting at. Without, we don't want to point fingers at this point, but at the end of the day, ballot harvesting is illegal in this state. If those ballots had been mailed in the normal way, that would be just fine, okay? That's not a problem. But when someone brings those ballots on behalf of somebody else, because we don't really know who filled them out at this point, although there is a signature on the outside of the envelope, and we're supposed to check that signature.
Okay.
Again, I use the word supposed to.
Right.
Okay.
So
it just opens the door for a lack of transparency and a lack of confidence in the system.
I don't know that there's much confidence in the system as it stands.
That's what I want to change.
Okay. So, I kind of get it. We're getting a tough time. How do people find you? How do people, we know how to vote. Let's get out there and vote. I'm still one that would rather wait online and vote in a booth, okay, than send in, mail in. I want to make sure I'm counted, and going there is the way I know I'm counted. And, it's strange because everybody sees things as, well, everything has to be instant gratification. They don't want to wait online.
Don't want to wait in line.
Okay,
right.
So I kind of say, really, don't you, this is a privilege we have. Don't we want to salvage this privilege we have? When I started to vote, we would go into this little closet, basically, pull the curtain.
Yeah, remember the curtain?
Vote.
Sure.
And then leave. Now it's before you get in, it's vote for this one, vote for that one. They might as well put a jumbotron on and say who to vote for, say who you voted for, because it's not private anymore. People leave the booth and say, yeah, you should definitely vote for Mr. A or Mrs. B. It's not, people have opinions that they don't know how to keep to themselves sometimes. Okay, and that's really sad. Whether their opinion is right or wrong, it's just an opinion. And voting is something that's a privilege. It really is something that's sacred and private, in my opinion.
Well, you know, by law, there should be nothing like that happening inside of the precinct and within the boundary, 150 feet, I believe it is, that there's no electioneering taking place. Okay, there are people that are allowed to do exit polls and things like that for people coming out, but not for people going in. Although someone can stop at a booth that's outside of that 150-foot line, and they can talk if maybe there's a race that they're just not really sure about. You know, a lot of times people understand all the constitutional positions that are up for vote, whether it be president, vice president, governors,
Right.
etc. But when they get to the more what we call down ballot races, which is your county elections, your county commissioners, city councilmen, etc., and probably the biggest one is the judges, right? Should I keep this judge or should I not keep this
I was
judge?
never in front of him, so how would I know?
And unless you do research ahead of time, you just don't know. Right?
And I told you before you got on, I says, this is not about a political party. I don't want you to discuss a political party because I want people to go and use their heads, okay, and
Exactly.
vote with your intelligence, not because one is red, one is blue, one is independent. I don't want you to do that. I want you to listen to everybody, get out there and vote for who you believe is going to be the best for the area that you live in. It's not about a political party.
Yeah.
But we're kind of running over our time. All right, so how do people find you? You have a website?
ElectUmansky.com or GeorgeUmansky.com. Either one will get you to the same place. You can see my biography. You can see where I stand on the issues. You can volunteer to be part of my team. You can donate, because let's face it, elections are not won without money. I just want to get back to the last point that you just made. It doesn't matter whether you are Republican, Democrat, or Independent. This office is a partisan race, but the person that sits in this office should be the most unbiased person there is in the entire entire government system, right?
I have to let you go.
All right, sir.
Mr. Umansky, thank you. Everybody, get out and vote. Use your head. Do some research. Take the time. You've got a phone with you that can tell you anything that you need to know. Whether you believe it or not, that's a whole nother story. Everybody, have a great day. We'll be right back.